isn't it? What an amazing story. And that slide of the, I forget what it says, the important things, this kind of credo, and the number one, which is attitude, getting your mind right. I can't agree more. And you notice all the way through that, the tumour's growing. He keeps smiling. Anyway, attitude is huge. So I just figure we've gone, it's typical me, and that's why I made the program a rough idea. So I reckon we should have a break. Some of you might have ordered lunch, but before we do, we've got 20 minutes or so, I want to introduce you to Steve Bolt. Who's meant to come up, Steve? Come up and talk now. He's meant to be talking now, but I'm going to cut him short because it'll just go too long. But he will be available out. He's been a lawyer helping the Hemp Embassy for as long as you've been here, nearly 20 years, has written books on cannabis legislation, and he's especially, he's in court in Lismore all the time, dealing with cases, and especially there's a lot of questions about the roadside drug testing. So you've kind of got 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can talk to Steve outside, and he can talk after lunch too. But there's a couple of the ladies' toilets there, the men's is around there, and the guy in the doorway is Dave Hyde, who runs this place. And he's a great Nimbin identity. And he had the Bringabong shop up in town that burnt down with the museum. So he's moved down here, created all those gardens, made a great pad. So to stop it being a rush at lunch, you can actually order earlier on the round table down there, or order and come back at 1:30 or 1:45. So we'll work it. But you've got Steve for 15 minutes, and then I'll introduce you to Radical, who's going to do extraction demonstrations when we have a break. So Steve Bolt, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Michael. Thank you. Hard to do this in 15 minutes, so I will try to talk a bit slowly, but also a bit quick. What I was going to do is have a very brief introduction to the kind of framework, and then do questions. So that's going to be hard in 15 minutes. The very first thing to say is the use of cannabis in New South Wales is illegal. Cannabis is a prohibited drug under the New South Wales legislation, and therefore use, possession, supply, cultivation, any activity around cannabis is illegal, unlawful in New South Wales. Criminal offence, depending on the quantity involved and whether it's supply or possession, etc. Certainly jail penalties apply, including to possession. It's a offence with a jail term possible. Medicinal cannabis, no such thing. From the legal point of view, there is no legal defence, except for a very, very tiny window. So it's not, for practical purposes, it is not true to say that medicinal cannabis is legal in New South Wales. It is only legal if you have a prescription through the process, which is ridiculously impossible to access. The police routinely test people who are driving motor vehicles for alcohol, of course, but also now for drugs, for the presence of THC in your saliva. It's a criminal offence, driving offence, to drive with the presence of THC. The test involves a swab at the driver's window. If that shows positive, you're taken back to a police station or a bus, depending on the setup, for a further test. A further swab is taken, stuck into a machine. If that reading is positive, you are told not to drive for 24 hours. If that is negative, you're allowed to go. But either positive or negative at the police station / bus, that same sample is then sent down to a lab in Sydney. If it's positive, with the analysis is done, positive to THC, you get a notice to come to court. If you are found guilty of driving with the presence of THC, as a first offence, you lose your licence for 3 months. If it's a second offence, you lose your licence for a minimum of 6 months. There's also fines and so on apply. If it's your first offence, you are likely to have no conviction recorded, which means you do not lose your licence, you don't get a fine. But for second offences, you don't get it twice. So second time you get tested and positive, you will be found guilty and 3 months disqualification minimum and probably a fine. Again, no defence for being a medicinal user of cannabis. Okay, so that's the basic law in very small nutshell. I am happy to talk to people about sort of individual cases to an extent outside. Questions. Okay, just to see how we go, how we roll. Person there, thanks. The offence is to drive with the presence of THC. That's how it's expressed, okay? So they test for THC. If you take a product which is CBD and no THC, then you would test negative. However, what I'm saying is if you test positive, if it comes back with THC present, there's no level. For practical purposes, there's no level. The offence is not to be under the influence, but to drive with it present in your saliva. So if they find THC present, then you're before the court. My understanding is that it's very hard to get a CBD product that has zero THC. It may be a little small quantity, but what a lot of people understand to be CBD is CBD, but with a little bit of THC, possibly enough to be detected. Yes, at the front. Who knows? Question was, how long does it stay in your system? Who knows is the answer. Routinely people say it's been 2, 3, 4 days between smoking a joint and testing positive. That is, they claim at least to have 2 or 3 days of between consumption. That's probably not true in every single case, but it must be true in some of them, is my view, so it's really difficult to say. The science is extremely limited about how long THC is detectable in saliva after consumption. The government website says up to 12 hours. That's rubbish. It's certainly longer than 12 hours. It's probably days and days and days, but who really knows? Yes? It's a bit hard to... Yeah.
So you want to know what we can use to hide it?
Yeah, well, it's something that stays, because I know that if they test you as negative, that they think you're stoned, they can take you back into the station and wait, for whatever you have used to wear off.
Well,
yeah. Come back 3 times.
Did everybody hear that question or most of it? With alcohol, what they do, if the roadside test is pretty low, that is you've had, a mouthful of beer, too much kind of thing, they take you back to the station. They often let you sit around for 5, 10, 15 minutes, half an hour for it to drop down below the level. Okay, they're sometimes pretty reasonable about delaying the second alcohol test. Up to the cops. But with the drug testing, it makes no difference, no practical difference, because they don't know what they're doing. I don't mean that impolitely, they just don't know what they're doing. They're just testing. There's no way of knowing. You can be stoned off your tits and test negative, just walk out the door, or you can have a very, very small quantity of THC in your system and be positive. There's no way from observing your behaviour or what you tell them or anything that they would know that waiting half an hour is going to be a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the test outcome. So from a testing point of view, from the policing point of view, it makes no difference. They just get to you when they get to you, and if it's a delay, it's a delay. They do it quick, they do it quick.
Sorry, I might just clarify something from my own
Sure.
experience and studies, that you're asking about how long does it stay in your system. So if you take a THC oil at night, and they're talking about 12 hours, but generally 6 hours to 8 hours, depending on your own body and metabolism, it dissipates for a mouth swab. But let's say you have a mouth swab and you look at suspicious THC. Depending what state you're in, they want a urine sample, generally in the bus. And then if you've taken THC, generally speaking, it'll last in your system as a urine sample for 6 days. So that's the thing. Even though it may not be there or in a mouth swab, it is in your urine for 6 days. If you're taking oils sublingually, under the tongue, in other words, if you inhale the product regularly, it can be there for 21 to 30 days.
In your urine?
No, well, yeah.
In your blood?
Yeah, it's a little bit different, the blood test, urine as well.
But the practical question, though, urine and blood are different to saliva. That's the point. They only test for saliva. If you test positive on your saliva test, they don't take a urine sample or blood sample. They send the saliva off to the lab, and that's what they test. So the science is very, very limited about how long it's detectable in saliva.
Did you tell them about the 3 tests?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you hear?
So I haven't heard of a urine test in a bus.
No, they don't.
They only do saliva. If
They
you
don't.
pass the first test, your history, basically, because the second test is sent to the lab.
Yeah. And only 3% come back negative. Whatever the second test at the police station is really unreliable. So it's often there are false negatives. That is, it comes back positive from the lab, but the police reading of the machine says, no, you're okay. Okay. Fellow at the front.
Is there any intention to get a level of intoxication or a level of impairment in testing?
No.
No, never.
No. Again, it's very difficult to... Well, two things. There is another offence of driving under the influence of a drug. That's a separate offence, all right? So if you're swerving and driving through stop signs and running people over and that kind of thing, and you test positive for a blood test or a urine test, then you've got a problem about showing, or the charge would be you had a drug in your system and it affected your driving. So there's a bit of evidence in that scenario. For the driving with presence offences, they don't have to prove any impairment. It doesn't matter. It just is at present. So the evidence the police rely on is a simple one-page paper signed off by an analyst in Sydney at a lab saying, I tested that sample, reference number blah, there was present THC. And that's the evidence. Any amount. Who knows what the amount is? So tiny amounts from days and days and days ago can be detected. Person there?
I just want to say that a friend of ours recently got off, and I believe that there were two things came out of his court case. One was that he claimed he'd been eating hemp seeds for cancer, which is all true, but apparently the tests that they test hemp and CBD products for THC for all your eating, all your hemp, is, sorry, the test that they do, the cops do, is 100,000 times more picky, say, than what you would, if you're eating hemp seeds with THC. And when he was in court, their expert witness, apparently this cop's police witness, quoted a study that said that they, tested people eating hemp seeds and that there's no way possible that hemp seeds with like their tiny bit of THCA can turn into THC. They tested 24 people. If you look up the study my friend did, he eventually got off because he was able to out-talk the science of the police and their outright lie about stuff. And just that you know that he did eventually get off with the, I can't remember the finding was, but a lot of people are eating it and it can happen. So it is a way to feed yourself if you are honestly.
Does it work, Steve? Does hemp seed work?
Could I add to that and sort of translate that in a different way to some legal speak? What you're talking about, your friend's experience, sounds to me very much like a defence of what's called honest and reasonable mistake. Okay? So the legal defence is they don't have to prove that you're impaired. They don't have to prove that you knew that you were stoned or affected by the drug. But if you say to the court, I honestly did not think, not that I wasn't stoned, I did not think I would have any THC in my system, honestly didn't think that would be there, and I had a reasonable basis for thinking that, I might just, had some sort of basis for that, then okay. So if you are someone who consumes hemp seed every day, you tell the court, I have hemp seed for breakfast, lunch and dinner, rub it on my skin, I'm an enthusiast for hemp and I consume it, but I do not smoke it, and hey, this test positive, it must be because of that. I hand on my heart, I didn't smoke it, honestly. Very surprised that it's here in the reading. If the magistrate accepts that's truthful and accepts that's a reasonable explanation, then they can let you go. You're not guilty of the offence, right? But it's got to be honest and reasonable, and it comes down to how you present, I suppose, as a witness in the witness box. Your evidence, your account of your explanation is tested.
You appeared 13 times before they actually.
Yeah, okay. Good. Person at the back.
If you refuse the test instantly, like on the spot,
Yep.
what are the ramifications of that? Is that then lead straight to a charge or a fine or
Well, yes, it's a charge. There's an offence of refusing the test. You go to court, you get probably convicted, probably lose your licence for 3 months, 6 months. I think it might be a 6-month penalty for that. I'm not quite sure. But yes, it's a separate offence. So yes, you have that on your record rather than failing the test, perhaps. Yes.
What's the legal situation in Queensland? Is it different there?
The Borders only a little way away, but that's where my knowledge stops. I don't really know the details of Queensland law, so I'd rather not answer the question. There is testing, I understand, in Queensland. I don't know what the offences are and so on and so on. I don't know the words of the legislation. I imagine it's very similar. That is, the offence is to drive with around growing and possession, very, very similar. That is, it's illegal. Okay, so being a medicinal user or having a connection with medicinal use, if you're a supplier or whatever, then if that's put to the court as the explanation for why you're involved, whatever the offence might be, then you could expect some degree of leniency, but I wouldn't expect necessarily to walk out the door with no conviction recorded against you if you're found guilty. Okay, so it's treated sort of as a different category, but not a completely different category, and it's absolutely not an absolute defence. So you've still got to go through the system and hope for some, if you get found guilty, hope for some leniency or tolerance from the judge. Here and then, Sister?
I heard that if you have chocolate in the car and eat chocolate before you have your small test, it will come up fine. Is that right, or is that not what we consider?
You're asking a lawyer.
Yeah, well, that's right. What do lawyers know? Question, back to the roadside testing. Chocolate, does that mask? I don't really know. I've heard that chocolate's good. I've heard that apple cider vinegar is good. Fisherman's Friends apparently are good. I've heard all sorts of things. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that a lot of people, it's a bit random. The test is not great. The people who are pretty stoned and probably should be found positive seem to get away. People who've had a joint 3 days ago seem not to get away. It's a little bit, not fair.
Can I just give you Nimbin feedback on that? What Steve says is right. The first test is unreliable. But anything oil-based seems to be good. I don't think they carry olive oil, chocolate. Truckies love chocolate milk. It's in the car next to you. You pull it over, you have a swig. Anything oily, apple cider vinegar, people use Fisherman's Friends on your dashboard, anything citrus, but nothing is guaranteed because, as Steve said, the test is shitty. And then if you come positive on the first test, the third test in the lab in Sydney will find a skerritt you smoked a month ago. Steve, if you answered the question about, so if I tell the court, I read the government website and it said wait 12 hours. I waited 12 hours. I honestly thought I was okay, Your Honour. Yes. Is that cool?
I reckon that's very cool because it was what I was saying before. Is that an honest and reasonable mistake of fact? Well, who knows? I consumed a joint. Okay, maybe I should know that. Guess what? No one's caring about that. Okay, I smoked a joint. I'm going to drive a car. What's a reasonable thing to think when you've had a joint? Stubbing it out and driving up in the car, so maybe that's not a reasonable expectation that you would test negative to a roadside test. Okay, but next day, really, day after. So if you take the step of researching the situation, you go to the New South Wales Centre for Road Safety, which is the name of the little part of the Department of Transport.
What's the website called?
Centre for Road Safety.
That's the one.
Okay, there's a little kind of drop-down thing about drug driving, road testing. They say that THC is, or that they describe the test they do, they say that it detects for most cannabis users up to 12 hours after using, okay? Up to 12 hours. So if you read that and you take that on board and you wait 12 hours, bit of room, 15 hours, 24 hours, doubled it. Your Honour, I researched, it said 12 hours, I doubled it. I thought I'd be fine up to 24 hours. Got to be reasonable. It's got to be an honest opinion of yours. Right? If you wait 24 hours, 12 hours plus, having looked at the Centre for Road Safety information, that is the only information available from the New South Wales Government, the only information. The police put out statements every now and again saying, we get you after a few days, Before Mardi Gras, the official police announcement about policing at Mardi Gras and the testing was, we get you a fair way out. But the official government website says 12 hours. So yes, honest and reasonable mistake of fact, I reckon.
What's your opinion on people just importing CBD oil from overseas?
I have no opinion about
Is that a crime?
About it other than to say it's an offence. CBD is cannabis, so for the purposes of the import laws, cannabis is the definition includes CBD or CBD products. There is a fairly elaborate and almost impossible to access process of having authorisation to import medicinal products. So if you've got a licence to import a CBD product, fine. Without a licence, it's an offence of import illegal drug, and jail penalties apply. Yes.
I believe I heard that there is something on Facebook or online where people have been signed up to sell oil, CBD oil, like as a network marketing.
I'm not going to... who knows what's on Facebook?
I can tell you a lot of CBD websites have closed down. HempWorks has closed down. There is a website, eternalplants.com.au, you should write down. And you can buy CBD with a card on that now. And the websites keep changing. It's a game of cat and mouse. eternalplants.com.au. But CBD coming into Australia now, customs are picking it up a lot, and you lose it, and they don't come and bust you, but you lose it. That's what's happening.
Yeah, on a small quantity, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that'd be pretty much if you ordered for something overseas. Fellow in the black?
If you use the honesty and reasonable defence as such, like you were saying about the government website, 12 hours and such like that, if you were to, you would basically be admitting to using the illicit product.
Correct.
Now, admittedly, you may get off using the, get off the driving offence, but could you also be charged with using illegal drug?
No. Short answer is no. As a matter of practice, no. They don't even think about it. This is kind of slightly long answer with limited time. If it was an issue, the magistrate should give you what they call a certificate of protection against conviction for what you say in the witness box. So if you're a bit, for the extra sort of point, if you like, ask the magistrate in that situation. But as a practical matter, you never get charged for what you say about, oh yeah, I had a smoke yesterday. Someone over here? Yes. I have no opinion. I don't know what a doctor would say. You're taking hemp seed. That's a little bit, for me, I think a cop would say, so what, the doctor says that. I don't know. I don't recommend that. I don't know. I wouldn't go out of my way to get something from your doctor to say that, but some cops might let you go. It's very random. Random in the sense they don't need any explanation for why they want to test you, but it's certainly not random in the way that power is applied. The police target people they want to test.
It's supposed to be random.
It's supposed to be random in that they don't need an excuse. It doesn't mean they have to be fair and even-handed and just with their eyes closed. It means they don't have to have a reason for stopping and testing you. Arm at the back.
In terms of Australia being somewhat behind the US in relation to...
Yes. Not to mention Canada.
Medicinal and both and recreational.
Yeah.
Where do you, from a personal opinion or a professional opinion, see the tipping point for Australia to the enabling medicinal first performance? Do you see that within the next few years, or is that
I mean, the government has announced that both New South Wales and federal governments announced that medicinal cannabis was legal 2 years ago. So there's this real disconnect between the pressure on government to be seen as not being real bastards anymore, because everyone really knows that if you're preventing people accessing medicinal cannabis, well, everyone. A lot of people now in the community understand that's cruel to have laws in place preventing sick kids getting oil, cancer patients getting the relief they need. So government says, oh yeah, okay, we'll make it all legal. But they made it so elaborately complicated. There's now apparently 500 people in Australia who are lawfully, legally able to use cannabis, last I heard. 500. Probably, one estimate, 100,000 people in Australia using cannabis for medicinal purposes. Who knows? Who knows? But only 500 have actually been able, after 2 years, being able to access the system. So clearly that's just not going to work. What is happening in the real world, as in the community, is that people are accessing through unlawful sources. People are cooking stuff up, making tinctures, and it's happening. And it will continue to happen. And my advice, professional advice, is continue to do it, because accessing appropriate treatment is much more important than the relatively minor legal consequence of getting a fine and a conviction. Who cares? You're sick, you want to get better, take the medicine that works. How long is it going to be before we follow the Canadian lead? I don't know. But I think the Canadian announcement this week that they're legalising all forms of cannabis so-called recreational, so-called medicinal, what's the difference, is a good thing. And when that is proved to be a successful experiment, if you call it that, then Australia will think, okay, why don't we do it as well? Obviously, half of Europe's doing it, half of the United States is doing it. We are well way behind where we should be in terms of sensible policy around drug use.
Just a question around
Stop me when you want to.
growing possession. So if we were to grow, unless it was to grow CBD, cannabis, say, I don't know, 20 plants, 30 plants, whatever it is there a difference between them growing that and THC plants in the eyes of the law? If we were caught, say, growing 30 plants that was CBD, being a CBD plant, would that be a difference in how you
Yes. The definition of a cannabis plant for the purposes of New South Wales cultivation laws is I think it's less than 1% THC. Okay, 1% or more is cannabis, so-called. Otherwise, it's classed as industrial hemp. Okay, so yes, if it's CBD only and no THC or very low THC below I think it's 1%, then you're outside the legislation and lawful. You're meant to have production licence and so on through primary industry. There's sort of this regulation side you're meant to follow, but as far as the criminal law is concerned and what the cops are interested in, it's not cannabis.
Would they test for that?
It's okay.
They was growing that and they found that and they confiscated that and they just...
They test it, okay? And if you're in that unfortunate situation having to explain yourself to police officers, which is not a good place to be, then get some legal advice about how you would handle that perhaps, but proof of the testing of it would have to be sent to court. The cops would probably do it reasonably early on, realise it's below the limit and drop the charges, but it's a little bit complicated. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
You might
Maybe you've got to have a licence to grow CBD.
Yeah, you might have to go all the way through a process, but yeah.
I'm going to ask Steve to quit, only because I know you can. I just got too far behind. But you can also, I'm going to plonk him on a table out there, and you can go and ask him all those questions and get a longer answer, if that's cool. And I want to introduce you to Radical, who's going to be doing demonstrations of extractions, maybe a bit here, but also